Hi everybody, it's Talina here from Mom and Pop Wine Shop. I have a new addition to introduce. This is Coco. She might be creating some chaos during our interview, so I will apologize in advance, John, if the cat gets us into trouble. But we're here to talk with John House of Ovum Cellars. He is our featured wine for our November Wine Club. We're featuring the Gorge Sound Riesling, and I'm going to link in here and see if I can get John to chat with us and tell us all about Riesling and other stuff. Here we go. Let's see. I always mess this up. Give me a second here. There we go. There we are. Oh, the squirmiest thing ever.
I'm here.
Yay. Hi, John.
Hi.
All right, I'm going to put her down now and see if she can run around and not get into too much trouble. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I know you've been really busy with travel and with harvest and everything. So what have you been up to?
I just got back from an awesome week in New York and a little visit in Connecticut, and I was in Seattle and Chicago and Palm Springs before, just trying to go and see people, after harvest, because I was really craving the human interaction, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was in Serbia with Xenia and family all summer long, and I just missed a lot of my friends. So I didn't really go to sell as much, I don't really have much wine to sell, luckily. And it's been awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
We've all been missing that connection. I mean, this is, a great technology that we can avail ourselves of at this point, but it's not a very good stand-in for in-person interactions. And we just reopened our shop to in-person shopping a couple weeks ago, and just everybody just lights up when they walk in.
Yeah.
So that's been really nice.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an adventure, and I'm scrambling around today, stacking in all the wine I could stack in before the big holiday weekend and next week. So, when we tasted this wine together recently, you mentioned that the last vintage that you did of this was 2015. Is that correct? Prior to this one? So why did you decide to do Gorge Sound again?
Gorge Sound came from a... Go ahead.
Or why was there a gap in between the vintages?
It came from two different places. The whole idea of Gorge Sound and the label is actually some students that had somehow collected that sound wave on the label is actually what the place looks like in sound.
Cool.
So they captured this is in that right in Underwood Mountain area. We were working with a vineyard called Oak Ridge that had this oldish vine organic Gewürz. In our program at the time, which hasn't changed, meaning native ferments, no additions except sulfur, that Gewürztraminer struggled to finish fermentation the way we would prefer. And while it made very interesting Gewürztraminer, we found that for our program it was difficult because it was missing some components like, not sugar or acidity, which it was great there. It just missed the nutrients. And I found another site, which was closer to the Columbia River, which is where this Gorge Sound comes from. And it shared a lot of the, dare I say, mineral components of the Gewürz, in that they're not boisterous. These are restrained wines. They're quiet wines that have a lot going on in the palate. Now, maybe they'll become aromatic forward over time, because they certainly start out that way in the cellar. But once they get to this kind of quiet place where it's done with fermentation, I feel like those Riesling aromas kind of drift a little lower, and some earthiness comes out, and then the palate gets really expansive, and that's when we're trying to capture the wine. And I felt this wine in 2020 had that similar feeling. So I was like, I was trying to come up with a new label, and I knew that Gorge Sound was there, and I'm like, this is a Gorge Sound wine. And so we went back to it because it is what it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think is really neat about working with winemaker owners at the beginning of the shop, but then throughout doing the wine club, is just hearing a little bit more of the thinking behind and the kind of the personal connection that you have with this the way the wines, you know, show themselves to you. That's not something that you see out of large wineries, you know, where they're going for a recipe, they have a style, they have, you know, expectations from the customers. Here there's a little bit more I don't know, it seems to be a little bit more esoteric, you know, like
Personal.
personal. Yeah, really a
Very
little
personal.
more connected to the place. I like that. So when I partner with the winemakers for the local portion of the club, so far some folks have been really deliberate about the wine they want to be paired with, and other folks have had kind of no idea, and we've had to really work to hone it down. But you were one of the ones that just snapped his fingers and was like, "Ma de Gorgonnier." So I figured there might be a story there, a connection that you could share.
I'm obsessed with the wine. Dude, Ksenia and I drink so much wine at the house, and I mean, we've always drank a lot of wine. I was a sales rep back in Orlando, where I was born and raised. From I got to buy wine at a Whole Foods when I was like 22. A PDX wine like company hired me with this amazing portfolio, and I worked there for a couple years until a winery here hired me to be the director of sales.
Mm-hmm.
So
was that
I've always
Ah.
Shahil,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we learned how to make wine. And I'm just obsessed with tasting as much as possible. And when I tried the Gorgonnier, I love pure fruited wines that just don't have any apparent window dressing.
Mm-hmm.
And that wine every year is just like, oh, it oozes of Southern French Provençal wine, and it's organic, and it's not overdone.
Mm-hmm.
It has Cabernet in it, and you're like, what? And Grenache and Syrah, and it's all of those things that I want it to be. And I feel like it drinks like it much more than what it is.
Yeah.
And I feel that there actually is something there's a connection of that wine and in Oregon in their growing patterns. I've been doing a lot of research on it, and the degree days are really off. I mean, Gorgonnier gets 3,800 degree days. It's like the Sierra foothills, but really high elevation.
Yeah.
But there's something juicy about it that I just love. And it has nothing to do, I think, with Gorge Sound. It's not an inspiration in that regard. I just find it to be very complex and interesting.
That's the whole idea behind the club, is that people ask wine professionals all the time, well, what do you like to drink? And I always kind of giggle at the question, because what I like to drink and what you like to drink might be completely different things. But sometimes there are wines like that really resonate with us, that we get excited about, that I feel okay saying everyone should try this. And so that's the impression that I had from your reaction and wanting to share this wine. Yeah.
Well, there could be others. I'm obsessed with like 2016 Piedmont Reds.
Yeah, of course.
I drink so many of those, and I have a deep connection with Spain and Portugal, in that I managed the West Coast for an Iberian import company for many years.
Mm-hmm.
But Gorgonnier, that was the first thing.
Yeah, it's great. We were really excited to I had connected with that wine a long time ago, and so it was nice to be like, bing, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about them. Because with the pandemic, so what a lot of people don't see going on behind the scenes with wine buying is that usually we have distributors who are visiting us and keeping us up to date on what's coming into stock. And there have been so many issues with shipping and people not tasting or visiting as often as they normally would, that this is a portfolio that's based out of California that has some wine presence here in Oregon, but I hadn't really thought about them in a while
Yeah.
because their rep hasn't been out. So it was like, oh, this is perfect. So tell me about some things that you're excited about with the 2021 vintage.
Oh boy. Well, it made no sense how it turned out because we had all of these exceptionally hot days. I mean, 115, 118 degrees. Now, the vine shuts down at 95 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not metabolizing, it's protecting itself. And sometimes that stunts the growth. You think the vintage is going to be earlier than it actually is. Well, this year it was really hard to predict. What ended up happening is we have these very small berries, very thick skins, and not a lot of juice in them because we were so dry for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got early rains,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up getting the extra hang time that I was hoping for, which is just for flavor development, really. So we didn't get really we didn't get good yields per se, but what was left are very intriguing wines that a lot of them are struggling to ferment in our cellar.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a lot of work on that right now, which is basically like adding fish tank heaters into a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Because how do you heat up a barrel? And we're all native ferment, and we
Yeah.
don't add yeast. We don't, so it's a little bit of prayer, hope. And the wines that we have the biggest volumes of, two out of the three, like Big Salt and Old Love, have finished or are close.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I'm talking winemaker talk, like the things that are most risky and where my heart's at is like, I hope you
Sure.
finish because there's so much quality there.
Well, I
That
think this goes to what your life is like as a winemaker. People are curious, I think, about what it's like to practice the craft of winemaking, and yeah,
so much
continue.
uncertainty. And now listen, if we made conventional wines,
Yeah.
and which is totally fine in my book, I don't like the only argument I have with conventional wines, if you're adding water or acidity and you add nutrients and you add yeast, then you make that wine about you. It's not a reflection of its time or place. Maybe it's a reflection of place, but it's no longer a reflection of vintage. And I kind of love vintage variation, so not adding those things is important to me in that regard. Just let's get out of the way and let the vineyard and the vintage come through. But yeah, we get into a point of where I was going with that is it really dictates when you're going to pick fruit, because you want it to ferment well in the cellar if you're not going to add anything. So that's a rabbit hole that's like, there's so many questions that go with it, so many things we're still learning, especially with new vineyards.
Yeah.
This Gorge Sound in 2020 was so high in elevation, it was above a lot of the smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically on the Columbia River, so there's a lot of wind coming through, so it really wasn't affected by a lot of the fires. And then this year, it was pretty cool. It was kept cool even through those hot days, to the point where it's going to make something really magical this year again. But the vineyard sold, so we don't know if we're going to get to work with the fruit.
Oh man. Yeah.
So more uncertainty, but you roll with it, because Ovum is all about, Xenia and I started Ovum to learn what Oregon can do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through the lens of Riesling, Gewurz, and Muscat. And that's expanding because I'm learning that Oregon can ripen. I mean, it's so diverse, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a cool climate across the board. It's a warm climate. It's not hot. I mean, it's in the middle. I mean, that's why you can grow figs in your backyard in Portland. I mean, you're
Yeah.
not doing that like in the Mosel in a
Yeah.
in a true cool climate. We have the capability to ripen so many different grapes. So um, I'm open to many. We started making Albarino this year. We started making Cabernet this year.
Mm.
Um, we and Syrah, and in small amounts. So the focus will always be white.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just being
So
open-minded.
what, you know, you had your training at Chehalem and then you decided you were going to vinify Riesling.
Mm.
How did that happen?
They were making so much Harry
Yeah.
Peterson Nedry was obsessed with Riesling. I
Mhm.
was when he hired me. He knew that. I think there was like a lot. I mean, I was a kid. I was 26, 27 years old when he hired me. I still talk to him to this day, and I can't believe it. And he, you know, they made more white wine than red when we
Mhm.
started. And I don't know of many other wineries of their size that were kind of family owned, meaning like King Estate may have made more Pinot Gris, than Pinot Noir. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and I've got respect for them too. But it was learning how to make wine at Chehalem was basically going to school.
Yeah.
And Xenia, my wife, who we make the wines together, um, she got to work in the '07 harvest, and then they hired me for director of sales. And I was kept in the production discussions, I mean, per my request. And Xenia became effectively the enologist, assistant winemaker. They weren't big on titles, which is kind of cool. And it was like learning how to make wine at a UC Davis. I mean, it was at the highest level of
Mhm.
um, precision.
Yeah.
I was less interested in that because I had come from selling Dresner in Orlando,
Mhm.
in like '05. I mean, you can only imagine. But I understood that there was another path. I asked a lot of the people who had been around before me, like Pat Dudley at Bethel Heights, why don't we ferment Riesling in barrel? And she's like, keep, how do you keep it from going dry? I was like, why don't you want it to go dry? Doesn't it need to have sugar to sell? So the brain was like, we need to make things that sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just, ironically, I came from the sales world always wanting to be in production. But how's a boy from Orlando going to make it to Oregon, like without going through UC Davis first? And
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to do that, nor did
Yeah.
I want to.
Yeah.
So we got to work at this incredible place
Yeah.
and then take that technological mindset and apply it to a much more basic winemaking style. Got really lucky.
That's really cool.
Hmm.
You're constantly having to look for vineyards around Oregon to work with, as you just said, like, as production changes and scales and things happen. Are you ever interested in planting your own vineyard?
Yeah, of course. It's
Of course.
that's the
Well,
dream, and we're really close. We actually bought 40 acres in Eola Amity um, just before I created Big Salt,
mhm.
and then Big Salt exploded, and we have no partners. So the only way to get more liquidity to make more Big Salt was to sell that property, which had bad juju on it anyways. Um, it it just did. It does.
Yeah,
I hope it doesn't now, actually. That's and
yeah.
um, and we are in search. Boy, there are so many places. I mean, if I
Mhm.
really had the capital, I would buy up land all throughout Oregon.
Uh-huh.
But we're looking in Hood River and that White Salmon area,
Yeah, yeah. That,
and we're waiting for the right property. Sorry.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. I would, if you had to compare that area of the gorge or different parts of the gorge to other regions that people might be more familiar with, you know, what would your top comparisons be?
Oh, great question. Um, yeah, are you ready? It's like
Of
I'm a
course.
wind-up doll with this stuff. I'm a jack in the box. If I get really going, I have done so much research. Um, I have found different weather stations that kind of talk to one another, that have algorithms that basically are telling me that the heart of Hood River is more similar than anywhere else in the world to an inland region in Tuscany.
What?
Yes. And
Huh.
it's so close, but it's a strange area. It's it's like it's tucked in between two small mountainsides. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, what's Hood River? Like it's this
Yeah.
bowl, right?
Yeah.
And then the Columbia is right here. And if you
Yeah.
look at them together, they have similar degree days. The
Mm-hmm.
most um, other areas would be uh, Ribeiro or
Yeah.
Riberos do Minho in the Ribera Sacra region.
Mm-hmm.
And why they are so similar has nothing to do with soil and everything to do with a lack of humidity, a lack of rain for the primary growing season. They collect their rain just like us now until
Yeah.
June.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
could you imagine growing Sangiovese Grosso like Nate Reddy probably is doing? I
Uh-huh.
haven't talked to him about it. I know he's got to have it. He'll never make a single one, but they are very similar. Now, if and when we buy land there to plant, which is astronomical, by the way, because the pear
Yeah.
industry, we work with many vineyards there now, and
Mm-hmm.
um, like the Riesling we work with, they grow. The owner said we harvested 100,000 pounds of Riesling this year and 3 million pounds of pears.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
so we're basically looking to buy a pear orchard that we will convert. And I don't know what we'll plant yet. It definitely won't be all Riesling, but there will be some. Um,
I
and
don't know anything about like orchard profits and losses, but I would think that it would behoove them to consider if they knew that they had a customer for Riesling, that maybe they would make more money selling Riesling grapes than having like, I don't know, maybe not. The
I
scales
looked at
totally
I
different.
looked at the P&L of an orchard. We were looking to buy a site right around harvest. It was just terrible timing, um, and it's not too bad
Mm,
because those pears are basically some of the greatest pears in the world.
yeah.
Um, so but yes, it's similar to certain part of Tuscany that I really wasn't familiar with,
Mhm.
and that northwestern green Spain. And that is actually true for most growing regions from Portland all the way down to Cave Junction. When you
Mhm.
get to Medford and the Applegate, you start really looking more towards certain areas of Portugal. But it really is divergent from France because except for this region, Provence, because
Yeah.
they actually don't get rain just like us,
Yeah.
and that changes the growing cycle of the grape dramatically. I mean, that's no shock, right?
Right.
Like we don't get rain like
Yeah.
Piedmont or Burgundy or Bordeaux that they get 1 to 2 inches all throughout the summer, and you walk through the vineyard and it's filled with grass that's green, and we
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
after July 4th we don't have that.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't speak to quality so much, it's just really fascinating and um, yeah,
Cool.
great question.
It's fun to pick your brain about these kinds of things. Um, well, I don't know. Most people, I don't know. I enjoy talking about Riesling and food and Riesling, like what some of the basic questions that people always ask about what to pair with wine and food. But I think some of the conversation around Riesling is really tired, because everybody just says, oh, well, you need, spicy Asian food to enjoy with your Riesling. But it's so suitable to almost anything that you can prepare. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to put this into our club in the winter season when there's heavier kind of classic savory meals around. So, with that in mind, is there something in particular that you like to enjoy with your Rieslings that's not the typical pairing that people discuss?
I mean, you said it. It's super. People go to Asian food and spicy things because they're really hard to pair with. But you
Yeah,
back that out, and Riesling basic great. Look at this cat.
I
Um,
know.
awesome. Um, I think, in the end, it's one of the most versatile. I'm obsessed with, the kind of basics like the roasted chicken and like throwing bitter roots in there, like rutabagas and turnips, and
Hmm.
like watching um the earthiness in our wines just can't get canceled out and suddenly they get fruity.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of like finding that flavor in the wine that I find most intriguing, and then trying to find something that's the same so it cancels it out.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
sounds kind of crazy. It's like, oh, I want to pair something that's going to heighten it, but
Hmm.
really, there's other things to be unlocked in the wine.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, roast. Sorry to be basic. Roasted chicken. Um, what what else has been crazy like mushroom risotto situations with Gorge Sound, because Gorge Sound has this weird like tobacco thing
Hmm.
that's coming from acacia. So I
Yeah.
didn't speak to how it's made, but
Yeah.
we brought it in, and normally we would soak it on the skins a little bit because it was
Hmm.
2020, there was smoke. I just brought it in, I pressed it really gentle, probably left a lot of juice behind because
Mm.
I just didn't want to push it.
Yeah.
And then it went into an Austrian cask. So we're
Hmm.
having these oval casks, like egg-shaped casks built in Austria. And then there was enough. I was okay if it was just one cask, by the way, but we were lucky enough to get to two more barrels. And I thought the qualities of the juice were so high that I ran out and bought two acacia barrels. I called the Cooper and I'm like, please tell me. And they're like, oh, we will get you these barrels, 3 days there will be that. And I'm like, okay, great, cool. And they're always curious what you're going to use it for.
Of
And
course.
that's my business. Um, and when Riesling and Acacia goes dry, in especially when it has like almost Auslese like characters on the lab sheet, meaning the sugars, the acid, it's all there. It really makes the wine, if you're lucky, taste like tea,
Hmm.
sweet tea, like where I grew up in the South, like Lipton, which is really oolong or like black tea with
Yeah.
some light honey in it. And that's in this wine, but there's like basically no residual sugar. And then the barrel is where all that crazy texture just goes to tin.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got some bergamot, like Earl Grey notes when I was enjoying this. That was a really fun surprise that I don't really think I had experienced before, certainly in local Riesling. So,
If
um,
we stop, that's a great note. I get it as well. And if we stop the fermentation, maybe with like 20 grams of sugar, this is a very different wine.
yeah, yeah.
It's very figgy and boisterous,
Mm-hmm.
but you let it go dry and then it goes more inward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, we call our wines quiet wines of place.
Yeah,
It's not about being the most uh, powerful in its youth.
yeah, yeah. So do you still have bottles tucked away of your first vintages?
Yeah, I love Bill's gourd sound with chipotle butternut squash soup. Outstanding. Um,
Yeah.
he's one of my buds. Amazing
Awesome.
supporter of what we do. Um, yeah, we have those early releases. I've actually there nobody knows this really, but we'll produce certain wines and just we're not releasing them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to store those kind of wines for 10 years
Mm-hmm.
because most domestic producers can't afford to do that.
Right.
So in a few years, you'll see a release. We check in on them. Everything's aging really well, unless we made a mistake of not sulfuring enough, which was that kind of like real wine Dresdner mentality I had in the very beginning. So a few of the wines have a little pre-mox on the
Mm-hmm.
nose, but are great on the palate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's why I'm not afraid to use as, moderate sulfur to make sure the wines are going to live a long time.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing is something people should reach out directly to you to inquire about, or sign up for a mailing or something, like if they are curious about finding out about cellar releases, or
Yeah, we
just show
yeah.
up at the wine bar.
Yeah, we don't even pour most of that stuff at the bar. It's so funny. I almost forget because I want to make sure all the distributors and the people in the on the website are taken care of.
Mhm.
And we've just had so much support on every level. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot and be
Yeah,
greedy. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean those I intend on releasing some uh, to the broad market. Actually, I should tell you, we we're releasing. Oh, you tasted the ceramic bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So those
Yeah.
wines are getting labeled. That's the cool new thing we're doing, I would say, which is we have a group of biodynamic and organic wines that are made a little outside the ovum style, which is to say they're a bit more of a reflection of us, but they're still not manipulated. In fact, they're probably more raw than anything. Um, but because they're different, we put them in the ceramic bottles. It's called Rare Form. Um, and the first one is going to be actually a sparkling wine, Method Champenois. Xenia has been made the wines with Nate at Argyle for 6 years.
Yeah.
So many years ago, we started a sparkling program, and this will be the first release. And it's fermented in amphora, aged in barrel, and then on tirage for like 2 years.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That's going to be something else.
And it's
Yeah.
very low bubbles, low atmosphere of pressure.
Uh-huh.
So we have so many things up our sleeve, and
Cool.
I'm super. I really appreciate you choosing Gorge Sound. I know that there's a ton of wine out there.
Well, we like seeing what you're up to, and really enjoy being able to showcase all of this creativity and ingenuity and heart with
Hmm.
this with the club. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell people before we wrap it up?
Well, I hope they drink the Gorgonier. I hope they reach out to you. I have friends that are joining in and out. I see on the
Yeah.
through the live stream, which is super cool.
Mhm.
That Gorgonier is just an awesome bottle of wine, right? I mean, when you tasted it, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is delicious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Dan and I often diverge a little bit on our palate for red wines.
mhm,
And when I saw his eyes light up, I was like, oh yeah, this is a winner. And I bought
it
an extra case because it was coming up from California, so that I would have additional to offer, especially sometimes people crack into their clubs and then want to revisit something. So the November Wine Club is sold out. I have more of the Gorge Sound and the Mal de Gorgonnier, but we did a ceramic inclusion from my husband, and the ceramics are a much shorter turnaround, and he made as many as he could make, and
sure.
we covered it for that, but that still leaves a little bit of wine left, which is great.
Well, and that Gorgonier is probably a good Thanksgiving wine too, like a curveball, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I tell people, like, if you're trying to figure out how to make poultry stand up to medium-bodied reds or things like that, it's all in the sauces and the spices. It's not that turkey's gonna inherently be good with one particular kind of wine. That's why we stuck some pimenton in the box, because it's a nice way to kind of dress up the flavors and give a little warmth and
Right.
spice, and hit some of those red fruit notes with your cooking.
So cool. Well, listen, it's Xenia's birthday today, so I'm gonna go
Oh,
celebrate that
no
with her.
way!
Um,
Okay,
we have
well,
some '08 champagne, and I just drank,
yay! Happy
and
birthday!
yeah, she's
Yes. Say no more. Get after it. Thank you so much for taking the time, and best wishes. And we'll catch you soon. Okay.
yeah. Thanks so much. Hi,
Okay.
everybody. Have a good
All right.
weekend and a good Thanksgiving.
You bet. Cheers.
Ciao for
Thank you.
now.
Bye bye.